The air hung heavy with sorrow as attendees gathered under a gray sky at the funeral of Chief Richard Harrison. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken sentiments, whispers of respect mingling with the distant sound of birds. Rows of polished badges gleamed on the uniforms of fellow officers, each mourning the loss of a man who had been not just a chief, but a mentor and a friend. Flowers adorned the casket, their bright colors a stark contrast to the somber occasion. Detective Michael Carson stood among the mourners, his heart aching as he gazed upon the casket draped in the American flag. Memories flooded his mind, Harrison's wise guidance, the late-night discussions about duty and honor, and the compassionate leadership that had defined his career. He was more than just a chief. He was like a father to many of us. Carson lamented softly to Officer Jenkins, his longtime partner. Truly, Mike. He would have done anything for this department, Jenkins replied, wiping away a tear. I still can't believe he's gone. As the eulogies began, the words painted a picture of a man committed to justice and community. Each story shared brought a medley of emotions, laughter interspersed with tears. Among them, a deeply loyal German shepherd named Max sat restless at the front. The dog's fur bristled as he instinctively sensed the heavy sorrow encircling him. Suddenly, the silence was pierced by a frantic barking that echoed off the walls of the church. The attendees turned, shocked to see Max standing before the coffin, his deep growls resonating with an urgency that rippled through the crowd. Max, Carson whispered, his brows furrowing in confusion. What's wrong, buddy? Max continued to bark and whine, eyes fixated on the casket as if sensing something the others could not. As his growls grew louder, a ripple of nervous murmurs spread among the mourners. This is highly inappropriate. I must insist, Deputy Chief Parker exclaimed, irritation evident in his voice as he stepped forward. Someone needs to control that mutt. But Carson could not shake the feeling that Max knew something potent. A communication from the heart. No. Wait, he's trying to tell us something, Carson declared, his voice rising above the murmurs. What do you mean? He's just grieving, Parker retorted, crossing his arms. Carson took a deep breath, his mind racing. I've seen dogs react like this before, especially when something doesn't seem right. We need to open the coffin. Various expressions crossed the faces of the officers, from skepticism to worry. Are you serious, Michael? Jenkins asked, concern overtaking his features. Yes, I am. We can't just ignore him. The chief wouldn't want us to. Carson's voice was firm, tinged with urgency. If there is even the smallest chance, we owe it to him. With some reluctance, Parker rolled his eyes but nodded. All right, but if you're wrong, this will be your mess to clean up. With shaking hands, the pallbearers gently lifted the lid of the coffin, revealing the solemn face of Chief Harrison. Gasps erupted in the gathered crowd, but the shocked silence quickly morphed into sheer disbelief. Holy, he's alive! Someone shouted, stepping back in horror. Harrison! Carson rushed forward, heart racing as he saw the chief's pale face. Can you hear me? Open your eyes. Max leapt to the side of the coffin, whining softly, his tale a mix of fear and hope. With a trembling hand, Carson checked Harrison's pulse. He's breathing. Get medical assistance, now, he shouted, his command slicing through the chaos. Chief, stay with us, Carson pleaded, his voice cracking. Please, we're here. We're going to help you. Just hold on. As the medics rushed in, the tension in the room shifted. The mourners were no longer just grieving. They were anxious, heart pounding with newfound hope and dread. Max's whimpers echoed the collective fear, magnifying the anticipation of what would unfold next. Minutes felt like hours as the ambulance arrived, the medics swiftly taking over, placing Harrison on a stretcher. Carson felt a mixture of relief and unresolved tension. Who would do this? He wondered aloud, glancing at Parker, who appeared strangely still. As they loaded Harrison into the ambulance, Carson glanced back at Max. Stay here, buddy. We'll figure this out, he soothed. Max's eyes were filled with an unwavering loyalty, and somehow, Carson felt prioritized to uncover the answer. His duty as an officer and the testament to friendship that had been forged in loyalty. The drive to uncover the motive behind this unspeakable act surged within him, a new resolve igniting like wildfire. As the door to the ambulance closed and it sped away, Carson turned to face the murmuring crowd. "I promise we'll get to the bottom of this. This isn't just an assault on our chief. It's an assault on everything we stand for." The room buzzed with murmurs of agreement, but Carson's mind was already ahead. He could feel the weight of responsibility on his shoulders as he made a silent vow to Harrison, to the badge, and to Max. The investigation was just beginning, and if there was one thing he knew, it was that the truth always had a way of clawing its way to the surface, much like a determined dog. For now, they had to uncover the shadows that lingered, but Carson had no idea that deeper conspiracy lurked ahead, intertwining their fates in ways unimaginable. After Chief Harrison was rushed to the hospital, Detective Michael Carson wasted no time. In the chaotic aftermath of the funeral, he gathered the remaining officers in a nearby precinct room, their faces filled with concern and curiosity. The only sound that punctuated the tense silence was the rustle of uniforms and the shifting of bodies as they adjusted to the gravity of the situation. "We need to find out what happened," Carson declared, standing at the front of the gathered group, his voice steady despite the chaos swirling in his mind. "Harrison is alive, but he was clearly targeted. We owe it to him and ourselves to uncover the truth." Officer Jenkins nodded emphatically. "Agreed. This had to be planned. Nothing like this happens without some inside knowledge." "But how do we track that down?" asked Officer Ruiz, a newcomer to the force, his brow furrowed. "We're already an emotional mess after the funeral. This is going to make things even more complicated." A fiery determination burned in Carson's chest as he spoke. "We start by interviewing everyone who was in his office before the poisoning happened. We retrace his steps, check security footage, look for anything suspicious. We may uncover something critical." As the team began to break up into smaller groups, Jenkins walked alongside Carson, concern reflected in his eyes. "You really think someone in our department is behind this?" Carson met his gaze, the weight of the possibility hanging heavily between them. "I don't want to believe it, but the timing is too coincidental. Don't forget, Chief Harrison was in the middle of an investigation into some corrupt dealings, and now he's fighting for his life." The two officers set to work, diving into the archives, scanning logs, and interviewing colleagues who had been present in recent weeks. As the clock continued ticking, Carson found himself plagued by images of Harrison lying unconscious. Fragments of conversations flitted through his mind as he pondered possible motives behind the chief's attempted murder. That evening, exhausted but resolute, Carson and Jenkins gathered around a table littered with files and notes in the precinct's break room. "So here's what we know," Jenkins said, sorting through the chaotic stack. "Harrison was close to exposing a drug-running ring that extends far beyond our department. A rookie found documents mentioning Deputy Chief Parker and a few other high-ranking officials' names." Carson's eyes narrowed. "Parker? I've always respected him, but the more we dig, the murkier it becomes." Just then, Officer Ruiz entered with an urgency in his step, holding a flash drive. "Detective Carson, you need to see this. I got it from one of the clerks who works in dispatch." "What is it?" Carson asked, his heart racing as he gestured for Ruiz to sit down. Ruiz plugged the flash drive into a nearby laptop, loading the files. "It's a security recording from the night Harrison was poisoned. The clerk found it while cleaning up after the night shift." As they watched the grainy footage, Carson's heart sank. The video showed Harrison entering his office late at night, looking strained. A shadowy figure lingered in the hallway before slipping into the office, out of view. The clip continued, revealing a heated argument, muffled voices, and finally, a struggle. "Can you enhance that?" Carson implored, leaning closer to watch. "What are they talking about?" Ruiz fiddled with the controls, enhancing the audio, but it was still too garbled to make out clear words. Just as they were about to give up, one phrase broke through, sent chills down Carson's spine. You won't expose us. You know too much. Jenkins exchanged a worried glance with Carson. Do you think it's possible? Carson straightened, adrenaline coursing through his veins. This isn't just an internal affair. It's bigger than we thought. We have to dig deeper and connect the dots before someone else gets to Harrison, or us. The next day, they regrouped to comb through the financial records, connecting names and events, looking for anything that hinted at corruption. Max, ever loyal, sat nearby, watching with unwavering vigilance. Carson took a moment to share a quiet conversation with the dog. I'll bring him back, Max. I promise. Carson whispered, ruffling the dog's fur. Max responded with soft whines, as if understanding the stakes involved. A call came through from the hospital that very afternoon. Harrison had regained consciousness. Carson felt hope but was also aware of the risks that lay ahead. We should go now, he urged, looking at Jenkins and Ruiz. He might have crucial information. They made their way to the hospital, determination etched on their faces. As they entered the room, they found Harrison propped up in bed, looking weak but alert. Despite the tubes and wires, his eyes radiated the spirit of a fighter. Chief, Carson said, stepping forward. Thank God you're awake. We've got so many questions. Harrison looked at him with a mixture of gratitude and urgency. You need to be careful, Carson. I have a feeling they'll come for me again. And they won't stop at you either. He coughed, his voice raspy. What do you mean? Jenkins asked, his voice dropping to a whisper. They're everywhere. I was investigating something huge, a corruption ring that goes straight to the top. I found documents that implicate Parker, even Judge Ross. Harrison breathed heavily, struggling against the fatigue washed over him. Carson's heart pounded. We have seen names connected to drug trafficking and financial irregularities. Are you saying these people are involved? More than you know. I uncovered connections to organized crime, Harrison explained, his jaw tightening with resolve. They know I'm close to exposing them. I need you to find the evidence before they erase me completely. Jenkins glanced at Carson, worry etched on his face. We won't let you down, Chief. We'll protect you. They'll try to silence you too, Carson, Harrison warned, his gaze steady. Trust no one until we can unravel this mess. As they left the hospital, Carson's resolve hardened. The stakes had risen dramatically, and they were dealing with powerful adversaries. He glanced back at Harrison's room before stepping into the elevator, the weight of responsibility heavy upon his shoulders. Carson knew he had to uncover the layers of deceit that veiled the truth and protect his mentor. Together with Jenkins, Ruiz, and the loyal Max, they would navigate the treacherous waters of betrayal that lay ahead. The fight for justice had truly just begun. Part 3. Unmasking the Conspiracy. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting an orange glow through the precinct windows, the air buzzed with tension. Carson, Jenkins, and Ruiz gathered around a conference table cluttered with documents and evidence they had pieced together. Max lay at Carson's feet, vigilant and alert, sensing the urgency in the atmosphere. All right, let's recap, Carson said, resting his hands on the table. We have Harrison's testimony that points to Deputy Chief Parker and Judge Ross being part of a corruption ring. We need to find more concrete evidence to connect them to the organized crime operations. Do we have a lead on that? Jenkins asked, scratching his head. The files we reviewed only hinted at names. No direct ties. Carson leaned forward, a determined gleam in his eyes. Ruiz, you mentioned something about a hidden SD card found in Harrison's office, right? Did you manage to retrieve it? Yes, I was able to recover it from the evidence locker last night, Ruiz replied, pulling out a small, unassuming SD card from his pocket. There could be crucial information on this. Carson took the card, a newfound hope surging in his chest. Let's see what we have. He carefully inserted it into the laptop and began navigating through the folders. As the files loaded, he felt the weight of their mission resting on his shoulders. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Finally, Carson clicked on a folder named Confidential and opened a document titled Operations Overview. His heart raced as he scanned the text. There it was, full names, locations, and transactions linked to drug trafficking and illicit dealings, all tied to those in positions of power. "Look at this," Carson exclaimed, pointing at the screen. "They have lists of drop-off points all over the city. This can blow the case wide open. Let's print this out," Jenkins said urgently, his eyes shimmering with excitement. "We need to get this to Harrison immediately. He needs to know that we're working to bring them down." Just then, the precinct door swung open, and Parker appeared, his authoritative presence demanding attention. "What's all the commotion about?" he asked, feigning ignorance. His gaze shifted suspiciously among the group. "We were just going over some old case files," Carson replied calmly, masking his irritation. "You know how it is, just gathering insight." Parker's brow furrowed, a hint of mistrust flickering in his eyes. "Make sure you're not wasting departmental resources on irrelevant matters. We have a lot on our plates." As Parker turned to leave, Ruiz whispered, "He's definitely hiding something. We need to proceed carefully." Once Parker was out of earshot, Carson exhaled sharply. "We need to get this information to Harrison before anyone else finds out. Jenkins, you stay here and cover for us. Ruiz, let's go." With urgency, they made their way to the hospital, dodging curious gazes and managing their nerves. Each footstep felt heavier as they approached Harrison's room. Upon entering, they found him propped up in bed, a determined look on his face. "What's going on?" he asked, eyes narrowing as he sensed the change in the atmosphere. "We found something big," Carson said, handing him the printed document. "This outlines the operations, all linked to Parker and possibly Judge Ross. It's not just speculation anymore. We have concrete proof." Harrison's eyes widened as he scanned the pages, absorbing the gravity of the revelations. This is everything I was working on," he murmured, shock evident in his voice. "You need to move quickly. They'll try to destroy this evidence." Just as he finished speaking, the door abruptly opened, and Parker stood there, flanked by two officers. "What's going on here?" he demanded, eyes darting from Carson to Harrison and then to Ruiz, who stood at the entrance. Carson's heart raced, adrenaline flooding his system. "Just making sure the chief is recovering well," he replied smoothly, forcing a calm demeanor. Parker's eyes narrowed, sensing the tension. "You need to be cautious. There are too many leaks currently. You may inadvertently put him in more danger, right?" "I'm sure that's your only concern," Harrison retorted, his voice steady but strained. "Mike, keep that information safe. We can't trust anyone right now." Realizing they were standing on thin ice, Carson nodded, ready to play along. "Absolutely. We'll make sure nothing gets out." Once Parker and his men left the room, the atmosphere shifted back to urgency. Carson turned to Harrison. "We need to strategize. We can't rush in without a plan." "Listen carefully," Harrison said, gathering his strength. "You'll need to approach this like a chess game. First, we need to find out who is very close to Parker. Anyone who can help us. There might be informants who would be willing to cooperate if they know they're on the inside." Ruiz leaned in. "What about the financial documents? If we can track financial transactions, we can link them directly back to corrupt officials." Carson nodded, formulating a plan. "That's our next step. Let's see if we can find discrepancies in the city's budget reports or unusual donations flowing in. It's time we turn the tables." With a newfound determination, the team left the hospital, their mission clearer than ever. They had to gather all the pieces to this intricate puzzle, keeping their goal in mind while navigating the treacherous waters of betrayal. Back at the precinct, they delved deeper into the records, working late into the night. As they pieced together the connections, they uncovered alarming evidence of lavish expenditures that didn't seem to connect with any official budget. The deeper they dug, the more alarms went off in Carson's mind. In the days that followed, they worked tirelessly, drawing links between funds, questioning contacts, and following breadcrumbs that seemed to fade into the shadows more often than not. Yet, amidst the challenges, Carson found solace in the unwavering presence of Max, who remained a constant source of loyalty and protection. One early morning, while Carson sifted through yet another document, an urgent knock came at the door. It was Jenkins, breathless and wide-eyed. "Carson, you need to see this. I just had a conversation with one of the clerks in the finance department. They mentioned something about a secret meeting happening at the old docks tonight. Rumor has it Parker might be there. Do you think we can gather a few officers to back us up?" Carson asked, adrenaline spiking. Jenkins nodded, determination written all over his face. "If we act fast, we can catch them off guard. This could be our moment. We can't waste any time."
"Who is Grab Max?"
"We may need him to sniff out trouble. Jenkins, let's rally some backup. We're not letting this chance slip away." As the team sprang into action, they all understood the risks involved. The fight was no longer just about protecting Harrison. It was about seeking justice and exposing an insidious corruption that had infiltrated the very heart of their precinct. They would need to rely on their instincts, their loyalty to one another, and the unyielding trust of a brave dog named Max. That night, as they made their way to the docks, Carson felt the weight of responsibility settle back onto his shoulders. But he also felt something else, a flicker of hope. They had come too far to turn back, and together, they would face whatever awaited them in the shadows. The night air was thick with tension as Detective Michael Carson and his team approached the old docks. Dim overhead lights flickered intermittently, casting ominous shadows across the ground. The sound of water lapping against the wooden piers added an eerie undertone to the already charged atmosphere. Carson led the way, with Jenkins and Ruiz close behind him, while Max padded silently at their heels, his nose twitching as he took in the myriad of scents that surrounded them. The excitement of the impending confrontation fueled Carson's resolve. They were finally on the brink of exposing a web of corruption that threatened to tarnish the very fabric of their department. "Okay, we need to stay low and out of sight," Carson whispered, scanning the area for any signs of movement. "We don't know how many people we're dealing with, so let's not take unnecessary risks." As they edged closer to the edge of the dock, the sound of muffled voices reached their ears. Carson motioned for everyone to halt, crouching behind a stack of shipping crates. He peered around the corner and spotted a group of shadowy figures gathered under the flickering light of a nearby lamp. Among them, Carson recognized the imposing silhouette of Deputy Chief Parker, alongside several other unknown men in dark suits, their faces obscured. "Looks like we found our suspects," Jenkins murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. "Let's see what they're saying," Carson said, straining to hear. Parker's voice cut through the night. "The heat is rising. Harrison is still alive, and if he gets a hold of that SD card, we're all done for. We need to end this tonight." One of the men, his voice low and gravelly, replied, "We can't take chances. If anyone finds out what we've been doing..." Carson exchanged tense glances with his team. "This is it," he said softly, adrenaline coursing through his veins. "We need to gather evidence. If we can capture this on film, it could be the key to taking them down for good. Do we have a backup plan?" Ruiz muttered, looking nervously at the men congregated before them. "We'll get the evidence and then call for backup once we have them on camera," Carson reassured them, his heart pounding with anticipation. "Stay sharp." As they repositioned themselves to get a clearer view, Max's ears perked up, and his low growl began to rumble in his throat. Carson placed a hand on the dog's head, shushing him gently. "Easy, boy. Just a little longer." Suddenly, a loud noise shattered the quiet, crates shifted, and the suspenseful atmosphere turned into chaos as several figures approached Carson and his team's hiding place. The officers quickly ducked behind the crates, adrenaline surging through their bodies. "Let's move," Carson hissed, and they began to stealthily back away from the scene, attempting to find a better position. Right then, however, Max's instincts kicked in. With a sudden burst of energy, he bolted from the hiding spot, charging straight towards Parker, barking ferociously. The unexpected revelation sent a tidal wave of shock through the crowd. "Damn it! What's that dog doing?" Parker shouted, raising his voice, panic seeping into his tone. "Get that dog!" one of the henchmen yelled, scrambling after Max. Carson didn't hesitate. He sprang into action, sensing the chaos that was about to ensue. Go! 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 He shouted as he led his team toward the fray. Mike! Be careful! Jenkins yelled, taking charge as they moved to contain the scene. Max darted back and forth, barking and weaving between the men like a flash of fur and fury. His instincts to protect were undeniable. The men in suits scrambled to catch Max while keeping their eyes trained on the approaching officers. Hold them off! Carson shouted. The adrenaline flowed, and he plunged into the fray, tackling one of the henchmen to the ground. Watch your back! Ruiz yelled as he grabbed another man, managing to wrestle him to the ground. Jenkins followed suit, employing his training to ensure they contained the situation. I've got him! Carson shouted, pinning the man down as another thug charged at him. But Max intercepted with a bark and a lunge, forcing the man to stumble back. Good boy, Max! Carson yelled, adrenaline pulsing through him. Keep it up! Amidst the scuffle, Carson caught a glimpse of Parker trying to escape into the shadows. Stop! He shouted, lunging forward but missing the deputy chief by inches. As the tussle continued, officers from the precinct began pouring onto the scene, sirens blaring in the distance. Parker glanced back, eyes wide, realizing the net was closing in. Back up! Parker yelled, drawing his weapon in a panic. But the approaching officers did not hesitate. Drop it, Parker! Carson commanded, his voice steady as he positioned himself strategically between Parker and the officers. Within seconds, they managed to trap Parker and his remaining henchmen, who were tangled in confusion over the sudden onslaught. A few of the precinct's officers moved in to secure the criminals while others apprehended the rioters. As Max continued to bark protectively beside Carson, the chaos gradually settled into a tense silence. Parker stood cornered, breathing heavily, and surrounded by law enforcement. You think you've won, Carson? Parker spat defiantly, his eyes narrowing. This isn't over. You'll regret this. Carson stepped forward, defiance resonating in his voice. You're under arrest for conspiracy, corruption, and attempted murder of Chief Harrison. This ends tonight. With the situation under control, Carson felt a wave of relief wash over him. The sound of sirens that had once echoed distant now drew near, signaling backup that would soon reinforce their position and secure the premises. As the chaos transformed into order, Carson turned to Max, who stood by his side, panting but unwaveringly vigilant. You did it, boy. You saved the day. He knelt down, scratching behind Max's ears, gratitude swelling in his heart. I owe you one, Carson whispered, the bond between man and dog growing deeper in that moment amidst the surrounding turmoil. Soon after, Harrison was brought to the site in an ambulance, his recovery apparent as he emerged, supported by medical staff. Haggard but resolute, he looked toward Carson. You did it. The pride in the chief's voice was palpable as he surveyed the scene of captured criminals, evidence gathering, and the end of a chapter of darkness. Great work, Mike. But before Carson could respond, a flicker of movement caught his eye. A badge-bearing agent stepped forward, followed by several more investigators. Detective Carson, we're here to assist. We've been monitoring the situation and had intel about tonight's meeting. The arrival of the federal agents meant help was on the way, but it also deepened the gravity of what lay ahead. The risks would still remain as the investigation developed further. Carson took a deep breath, realizing the fight was far from over. But for that moment, they had struck a crippling blow against corruption. The tension that had gripped the team moments before gradually dissipated. Victory was in the air, if only for a moment. With a renewed sense of focus, Carson knew that they would continue to fight. Together with his team, Max, and the unwavering strength of Chief Harrison, they would maintain their mission, to keep the streets safe and bring justice to those who sought to exploit power for their own gains. As the night wore on, Carson couldn't help but glance at the brilliant moon hidden behind dark clouds, a silence settling in their victory. A silent promise of justice served and accountability, echoing like a distant wave heading toward shore. The journey was challenging and twisting, but they would persevere together. After all, they had much more to uncover and a growing bond that fueled their relentless pursuit of truth. The aftermath of the docks incident revealed a complex web of corruption that extended far beyond what Carson and his team had anticipated. As they settled back into the precinct and began sorting through the extensive evidence collected, a whirlwind of emotions flooded over Carson. The investigation transformed into a citywide effort, with various task forces and federal agents collaborating to dismantle the larger organized crime network connected to Deputy Chief Parker and his accomplices. The corrupt officials were swiftly arrested, their ties to other high-ranking members of the department becoming apparent, sending shockwaves through the community. Days turned into weeks, and Harrison had returned to duty, requiring a careful recovery process before fully reclaiming his title as chief. Despite the difficulties of his journey, he remained steadfast in his commitment to restoring integrity to the department. In an early morning meeting at the precinct, the atmosphere buzzed with newfound purpose, a collective determination to rebuild the trust that had been broken. "Team," Harrison began, looking across the assembled officers, including Carson, Jenkins, and Ruiz. "What we've uncovered goes beyond corruption. It's a betrayal of what we stand for as protectors of this community. We need to hold ourselves accountable and ensure this never happens again." Carson could feel the sincerity in Harrison's words. "You're right, Chief," he said, standing up to address his colleagues. "We're not just here to enforce the law. We're here to embody justice. If we don't stand for integrity, then we've lost everything. Our goal is to implement changes," Harrison continued. "We'll be introducing new transparency measures, increasing oversight, and building stronger community ties. Making sure every officer understands the value of ethical behavior and accountability is paramount." As discussions unfolded, ideas flew around the room, strategies to improve communication, community outreach initiatives, and further ethical training. The energy was infectious. Officers began to feel a renewed sense of pride in their roles. Meanwhile, Max remained a constant presence, often wandering into the meetings, bringing a smile to officers' faces, a living symbol of loyalty and resilience. "Max is a reminder of why we serve," Ruiz remarked one day, petting Max affectionately. "He embodies the spirit that binds us, our commitment to protect." "Absolutely," Jenkins agreed, a grin on his face as he scratched behind Max's ears. "He's our little mascot of justice." As the department started laying the groundwork for transformation, they also received public support from the community, which rallied behind the newly implemented changes. Community members expressed their desire to work more closely with the police department, fostering an environment of trust and collaboration. Despite the hurdles they faced, Carson found optimism in the changes that were beginning to unfold. The momentum was shifting, and a new chapter was blooming, one filled with hope, resilience, and reform. Weeks passed, and whispers of the corruption scandal faded into history. But with every positive interaction they had, Carson felt the bloom of trust grow stronger. Officers now approached their work with a sense of purpose, committing to the ideals they had sworn to uphold. The final test of their resolve came during a community event organized to strengthen the bond between law enforcement and residents. A day filled with activities, laughter, and learning. It showcased the commitment of officers to serve and protect with honor. As Carson stood beside Harrison, watching the community come together, he felt a sense of accomplishment swell within him. "We did it, Chief," he said quietly, a smile stretching across his face. "We did," Harrison replied, a look of pride in his eyes. "And it's just the beginning." In that moment, Carson recognized how far they had come, the trials and tribulations that had shaped them, and the unwavering bonds forged through trust, sacrifice, and an indomitable spirit. As the sun set that day, casting golden beams across the event, Carson leaned down and scratched Max's head, who wagged his tail enthusiastically. "You're the unsung hero of this story, buddy," he chuckled softly. Max barked happily in response, a true companion in both light and dark, serving as the reminder of loyalty and perseverance amidst challenges they would always face. And moving forward, The team would navigate those challenges together, knowing they had emerged stronger, united by a commitment to uphold justice above all. Ever vigilant, forever bonded. As the community danced in the warming twilight, a sense of peace settled over Carson. Together, they were, once again, beacons of hope, with fur and heart beside them, committing to a future that would reflect the true essence of justice. The story illustrates the profound bond between humans and their canine companions, highlighting themes of loyalty, courage, and the fight against corruption. Max, the German Shepherd, acts as a catalyst for unearthing a dark conspiracy, showcasing the extraordinary capabilities of dogs and their intuitive understanding of human emotions. The narrative emphasizes the importance of integrity, accountability, and the value of standing up against wrongdoing. It serves as a reminder that courage can come in many forms and that we must always strive to protect those who cannot protect themselves. It encourages individuals to be vigilant, uphold justice, and work collaboratively for a better community. We invite you to share your thoughts on the story. Please like this video, comment below, and express your feelings about the significant themes we discussed. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you never miss the next impactful story. Every interaction you make is a massive encouragement for us to continue producing quality content. Your support fuels our passion. Thank you for joining us in this heartfelt journey. We sincerely appreciate your time and engagement, and we hope you found inspiration in our story. Until next time, may the courage and loyalty of our heroes echo through your life.